Many are injured after another car-ramming attack outside a school in China. Washington and Manila agree to share military intelligence on Beijing. And why is the CCP halting military talks with the Pentagon? Then more on this week's China News headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. And this episode is sponsored by Saily. Tired of wonky data service when you travel? Check out Saily. It's an affordable way to stay connected whenever you go overseas. I'll explain more at the end. Is China behind the severing of underwater data cables in the Baltic Sea? Earlier this week, 2 subsea data cables in the Baltic Sea were severed. The BCS east-west cable connecting Sweden and Lithuania was damaged on Sunday morning local time, and the Sea Lion 1 cable connecting Finland and Germany was damaged on Monday morning local time. Some European officials said they suspected sabotage, especially in Germany, with Germany's defense minister saying nobody believes that these cables were accidentally severed. However, American officials have said there's no evidence so far of malicious intent. Meanwhile, Finnish and German foreign ministers said in a joint statement, the fact that such an incident immediately raises suspicions of intentional damage speaks volumes about the volatility of our times. Wow, I don't think I've heard any politician anywhere say something more true. Initially, many European officials pointed the finger at Russia because, they're the usual suspects of nations whenever something shady happens, along with China, North Korea, Iran, and Iceland. Yes, Iceland. No one else is on to you, but I know you're hiding something. The timing is suspicious. It happened not long after news broke that the UK, France, and the US approved the use of long-range missile strikes by Ukraine into Russian territory. Though if it were Putin, it'd be more his style if instead of being cut, the cable was thrown out of a building. But Kepler vessel tracking data shows that one ship was in the right place at the right time to have been involved in both cable cutting incidents. And that ship, as seen in this footage, shot by a convenience store camera from 1993, is the Chinese-registered Yipeng 3. According to the Financial Times, the Yipeng 3 is owned by Ningbo Yipeng Shipping, a company based near the Chinese port city of Ningbo that owns only one other vessel. The bulk carrier was on its way from a Russian port to Egypt, according to the maritime tracking group Marine Traffic. Danish and Swedish authorities both launched investigations into the ship, and the Danish military is currently monitoring the bulk carrier, while investigations continue, as seen here in this crystal clear image circa 2024. China has strongly condemned the approval of long-range missile use against its no-limits partner Russia, with Liu Pengyu, the spokesman for the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C., saying that his country was committed to peace talks, and in pointed comments clearly aimed at the West that instead of pouring fuel on fire and escalating the war, relevant parties should strive to create conditions for a political settlement of the Ukraine crisis through dialogue and negotiation, and make practical efforts to maintain peace. So the incident could be a Chinese retaliation on behalf of Russia, but I'm sure if an investigation finds the Chinese vessel really was responsible, China will say it was an accident. A similar event happened in 2023 when a Hong Kong-registered container vessel called the New Polar Bear dragged its anchor across the Baltic Connector pipeline that serves Estonia and Finland. The vessel was later seen sailing with a missing anchor, as seen here, and apparently had dragged it due to stormy weather at sea. After initially stonewalling Finnish investigations, China admitted earlier this year that the pipeline's damage was caused by the New Polar Bear, calling it an accident. And like the Yipeng 3, the New Polar Bear had departed from a Russian port prior to the incident. The Philippines and the United States have signed a military intelligence sharing deal. This is clearly aimed at China, which has been ramping up its aggression in the South China Sea for years now, especially towards the Philippines, with incident after incident of the Chinese Coast Guard using water cannons against Filipino ships. But the increasingly violent nature of such encounters in particular is what has left the White House and the Philippines especially concerned. On Monday, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Philippines Secretary of National Defense Gilberto Teodoro signed the agreement at a Manila ceremony. In a brief statement posted on X, Austin said the U.S. and the Philippines are committed to deepening our alliance, strengthening regional security, and upholding our shared values in the Indo-Pacific, which for you Gen Zers roughly translates to 3 middle finger emojis next to the Chinese flag. The deal is called the General Security of Military Information Agreement, and it allows for the sharing of classified information that could benefit a U.S. ally's national defenses, while also allowing for the streamlined sale of certain classified technology. On the same day, Austin and Teodoro attended a groundbreaking ceremony for a center where the militaries of the two countries will coordinate joint operations, including the exchange of information. I wonder if these two things are related. The Biden administration has generally overseen a tightening of security engagements between the U.S. and the Philippines due to increasing aggression from Beijing. Austin also met with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and with Philippine forces patrolling the South China Sea on the western island of Palawan. Hopefully he was able to stay dry. For the first time in a year, China's defense minister has declined a U.S. meeting, effectively breaking military talks with the U.S. Oh, this is terrible, because those ongoing talks were so effective at getting the CCP to stop all the horrible things they were doing. Dong Jun, the CCP's Minister of National Defense, declined a meeting this week with Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Secretary of Defense. A senior American defense official, speaking with reporters before a summit of Asian defense officials in Laos, said that the Pentagon had offered to meet and that China declined, citing objections over U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. But the official doubted that reason was sincere and referenced other times such talks were suspended, like after the spy balloon got shot down, or following Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan. This is especially strange considering that Xi Jinping and President Biden just recently met in Peru, where Taiwan was among the topics discussed. So if Xi can talk about Taiwan with the president, why can't the defense chiefs discuss this issue, or any other? It isn't clear whether this was a wider decision to pause talks or not, but President Biden didn't mention any serious rift during a press conference earlier this week. Maybe the Chinese defense minister just didn't want to look like his meeting with Austin was an afterthought to Austin's meeting in the Philippines. Hey, while I was in the area, I thought we could catch lunch. U.S. officials acknowledge that the talks themselves don't really accomplish much, yet maintain that it's important for the two militaries to hold regular dialogue. Yes, useless dialogue sounds like a great use of time. And after the break, bad news for Hong Kong. Welcome back. 45 Hong Kong pro-democracy activists have been sentenced to jail in the city's biggest quote-unquote national security trial. The trial was based on Hong Kong's so-called national security law, passed in 2020, which was inspired by the CCP, allegedly to curb sedition and terrorism while upholding stability. In reality, it has curbed the city's democratic freedoms. The West has condemned the law and called for the release of the defendants, many of whom were arbitrarily held in jail while awaiting trial. But the CCP has supported Hong Kong in these arrests and trials, saying it was necessary to restore stability and rejecting external interference. 60-year-old Benny Tai is a former law professor at the University of Hong Kong. In July of 2020, he and 46 other activists organized an unofficial primary election, just weeks after the so-called national security law was implemented. The goal was to boost Democrats' chances of winning a majority in an upcoming election for Hong Kong's legislature. And it drew 600,000 signatures out of the 6.5 million inhabitants of the city. According to NBC, High Court judges Andrew Chan, Alex Lee, and Johnny Chan have said that the plan could have created a constitutional crisis and rejected the defendants' argument that it was within the bounds of Hong Kong law. The defendants faced the possibility of life in prison under the national security law, though Tai was ultimately sentenced to only a decade in prison, the longest of any of the defendants. Other defendants received slightly shorter jail terms of 4 to 6 years due to being lesser-tier activists. John Burns, a professor at the University of Hong Kong who specializes in the city's politics and governance, said that this trial is part of the authorities' efforts to sweep away political opposition, and that, given that the pan-democratic opposition regularly drew support from 40 to 60% of voters before electoral reforms in 2021 restricted candidacy to patriots only, the trial also aims to re-educate Hong Kong people about how they should act on their political beliefs rather than change the way they think about politics. Still, despite the trial and crackdown among Hong Kongers, there is still significant support for maintaining the city's historic pro-democracy norms, according to a 2023 survey. Another tragic car ramming attack has struck China, this time outside a primary school. The incident happened in the South Hunan province and comes after a series of deadly stabbing and car ramming attacks throughout the country this year. In fact, this is the third attack on a crowd in China in just a week. The driver of the white SUV in question was apprehended by parents and school security officers, beaten with sticks, and handed over to the police. State media said several students and adults were injured and fell to the ground, and several people were hospitalized, but a police statement later said there were no life-threatening injuries. These kinds of incidents are generally rare in China, but they've been on the uptick recently. Chinese police frequently report that the attackers state their goal as being revenge on society, amidst a worsening economy, property crisis, and high youth unemployment. In response, society said, "That ain't us, man. It's the government you're mad at. Take it up with them." Xi Jinping has ordered an increase in local authorities and state surveillance, as top CCP officials worry that these attacks will discourage tourism, worry the populace, and raise concerns about China's safety record. Because everyone feels safe in China, except Uyghurs, Falun Gong practitioners, anyone speaking their mind, or anyone using the infrastructure. Other than that, stellar record. The Chinese Communist Party is even releasing educational videos for children and people more generally on how to avoid car rammings and stabbing attacks, as if the victims hadn't thought of that. Oh, avoid the knife and speeding car. Genius! I was going to try and get away by jumping in front of it. China and Pakistan are holding their first anti-terror drills in half a decade. This comes after a spate of attacks on Chinese workers involved in Belt and Road projects based in Pakistan. On Tuesday, Beijing confirmed it was sending troops to Pakistan later this month to enhance security cooperation with its neighbor and ally. The Defense Ministry even announced that the exercise, called Warrior 8, is set to begin in late November and last through mid-December, with the aim to enhance the capability for conducting joint counterterrorism operations, according to Chinese state-run media. Is it just me, or does an anti-terrorist narrative called Warrior 8 sound like a direct-to-DVD Steven Seagal movie? China's state media says the troops will engage in multi-level and mixed training across various specialties and organize live drills in accordance with the actual combat process. They don't know how to talk like human beings. And the Defense Ministry confirmed that the troops in the exercise will be from the Western Theater Command of the People's Liberation Army. This is happening after the CCP reportedly pressured Islamabad to allow its security personnel into the country to safeguard thousands of Chinese citizens working in Pakistan from terrorists. But Pakistan denies such pressure, saying it's part of a media campaign to sow confusion about the nature of Sino-Pakistan relations. Well, let me clear the confusions. Chinese troops are being stationed in India's neighbor. I haven't seen such transparent hostility from a foreign nation since Iceland. I'm on to you. And this episode is sponsored by Saley. Before COVID, I traveled a lot for China Uncensored. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Australia, the Philippines, even both Koreas. But every time I went overseas, getting data service on my mobile phone was a serious problem. I'd have to find a store that sold SIM cards, pay some ridiculous fee, and pray I didn't lose my old SIM card while traveling. Or I could try to connect to Wi-Fi, but I could only get that while in my hotel or with some potentially dangerous public Wi-Fi that puts me at risk of being hacked. But now, there's a much better solution. Saley. It's an eSIM service, which is like a regular SIM card, only better. Saley keeps you connected to the internet all the time, pretty much no matter where you are in the world. Here's how it works. You download the app for iPhone or Android. You only have to do this once. Then, before each trip, choose a plan that works for you. You can choose a region or a specific country, like Taiwan, which is a country, and then select a data plan that lets you stay connected to the internet there for your entire trip. It's that easy. And if you do run into any hurdles, Saley has great customer support that's staffed 24/7 by actual human beings who will help you. Saley works with pretty much every iPhone or Android made in 2020 or later. And Saley has a special discount for China Uncensored viewers. Get an exclusive 15% discount on Saley eSIM data plans. Download the Saley app and use the code Uncensored at checkout. You can scan the code on screen right now and get started today. The link is also in the description. And check out the latest episode of my show Deep Thoughts While Gaming about Age of Empires 2 and how to build the perfect civilization. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.